David, you recently wrote an article for LinkedIn that I thought was really good advice, and the gist of it, what I got from it is that lots of us do our cost per acre when we're doing our planning and know the cost per acre of whatever crop we're growing. But as a marketing tool, you advocate for figuring out your cost per bushel after you know your yield. You think that's a better idea for what you want for a marketing plan?
Yeah, and the crux of it comes down to obviously the yield is unpredictable, but we can base it on averages and we can look at, what our worst case scenarios are and help understand, what is a break even, what's making us money. And, we see lots of prices this spring that I would suggest are very profitable for most farms on their canola if they took advantage of them when canola is over $800 a ton, and not everybody's selling. And I think part of that is because we're not understanding our cost of production on a per basis.
So yeah, because you say if you produce a 50 bushel per acre canola crop, it's quite different than producing a 35 bushel per acre canola crop if you want to know what your cost per bushel is.
Yeah, and most of the guys, we're looking at Western Canadian averages don't tell you anything. Like the break even on a Saskatchewan average is a big gap between a farm in Swift Current and a farm in Yorkton on what they're likely to produce. Costs are also different, but you need to understand this break even so you can make good marketing decisions. And selling for a profit's never going to be a bad idea. I think we don't spend enough time often in the spreadsheets during the summer season. A little extra time in front of the computer, or maybe it's napkin math. Probably is time well spent figuring out, is this, the current bid for new crop canola, is it a good price or not? Probably it's, we've seen this last little while where it might be a better price than guys think. Just because you hope you see $850 a ton canola doesn't mean it's going to be there, but it still might be very profitable at $750 or $800 a ton.
Now, in this case, a lot of producers are also their seeded acres move, and that kind of changes the equation as well.
Yeah, with this year with the flooding, I mean, we've seen, some of the worst hit guys are 20, 30, even 50% of their acres are flooded out. More in Manitoba, in Saskatchewan, we're seeing, a lot of that, 6, 7, 8, 10% flooded out. That changes your economics. You got to apply all those fixed costs. The land rent is due either way, whether you got to seed it all or not. The machinery payments are due even if you don't get to spread it over as many acres. So you need to adjust, and then hopefully you grew some more bushels this year because we got the extra moisture early. We'll see what starts rolling with heat blast if those bushels are there or not. It's a few guys are worried about the results, but we'll know soon enough.
And I guess you can work out your cost per bushel, but it doesn't change what the markets are going to offer you. So you still have to make your decision. And if you do end up with a higher cost per bushel than you would like, doesn't mean the market's going to reward you, but at least you know where you stand.
Yeah, and I hope we see some higher prices here after I think the market will realize the crop's a little smaller than everyone might have anticipated back in early July. As the markets realize heat blast is a big deal. The rain we had early doesn't always equate to yield, but the time will tell. The market doesn't care what your break even is. The biggest thing a producer can do is understanding his numbers. You can't always make the math work for you, but you can spend your time understanding where you're efficient and where you're inefficient. And this year is, it's one of those years where we've spent a lot of money on chemical with a lot of insecticides, passive fungicide. And so we hope those bushels are there to make this, a profitable year. But the market doesn't care. You got to take advantage of it. What's there is the selling into a rising market's probably not a bad idea. A lot of guys are holding, waiting to see how many bushels they got, if on the combine, but they've got 0 bushels marketed. So I can't say, I'm not farming myself right now, so I can't say what I've got my own example, but you know, being 0% marketed when we've had, you know, over $800 a ton on the exchange available, seems to me like there's some good chances to maybe put 10 or 20 or 30% of that crop that you expect, you know, into, you know, a committed market production, you know, marketed position. And at the end of the day, if you got fewer bushels, you know, it's very unlikely at this point that you've only grown less than a 30% of a crop, because you know you've got a decent crop out there. It's just, is it above average or average at this point?
What do you see with fertilizer prices? We seem to have seen them slack off. There was a reset in nitrogen fertilizer prices. They seem to be on the rise. I recently locked in some phosphate for delivery that was an ouch at $1,400 plus per ton.
Yeah.
Do you now looking forward to next year and trying to keep costs down? And I know this is an unfair question because you're not a fertilizer market analyst, but what do you think?
And I'm, you know, only going from what I can read and people I can talk to, and it's, you know, nitrogen's probably seen its bottom. Maybe there's an opportunity this fall if things straighten out in the Strait of Hormuz. You know, I don't see any reason why phos is going to come down. I don't see any reason why sulfur is going to come down. Potash is probably is what it is. Nitrogen's the one that might have some opportunity, but you know, if it is, it's going to be, you know, short-lived in my opinion. I think the bottom's probably in, or maybe there's one more shot, I guess is how I would put it. But as soon as there's any turbulence again in the world, whether that's the Strait or whether that's tariffs, whether that's the US, that's an excuse to make the price go up. We've got lots of production in Canada, but as soon as there's an excuse, the price is going to go up. We pay that global price, and there's lots of excuses on the horizon. It's just which one is it going to be? So I'd be looking to procure, you know, as much as I could if you have a good buying opportunity, but you know, I don't see any reason for it to go down.
Now, through Global Ag Risk, you get to see the input numbers, seed, chemical, and fertilizer for lots of producers. And when you compare that to the Saskatchewan Crop Planning Guide, especially for canola, what differences do you see between what you see with your producers and what the guide uses for what their assumed costs in each of the soil zones?
Yeah, and the guide is using big averages, so every producer is very different. Everyone has a different formula. I think unfortunately the guide is, when it gets published, the information that was used to generate it is stale. So, you know, that thing got published in January and probably the research was done in October, November, and the fertilizer price had moved a whole lot by the time it got published in January. And the same thing will happen again. So the production numbers look, you know, unfortunately, like they're out of touch, but I just think it's a timing issue. But oftentimes what we see is the guide gets probably has to use recommended rates. You know, that if the manufacturer recommends 5 pounds per acre, well, it's going to publish what the 5 pound per acre price is. But I honestly don't know a single farmer that's seeding their canola at 5 pounds per acre. They're usually cutting the rate a little bit to because they've invested in good drill technology and they're getting better germination. So I think that's a big part of it. We're seeing less cheaper seed costs than what the guide is saying. We're seeing slightly better herbicide costs than what the guide is saying as well. And that might be a factor of farmers only using a fungicide when they see the need for it versus the guide is budgeting it, as well as the impact of generics. Seeing a lot of farmers switching to generic products this year as costs are you know, at all-time highs. But then fertilizer prices look too low in the guide, and that I think is more of a function of timing. I don't think it's that the Saskatchewan, the ministry is predicting higher usage rates. I just think it was a little early in its research.
But we've really been given a gift with canola prices when you compare to the preceding period and what we thought canola would be worth to what is available today. Did you see that forthcoming? Do you think that that's a bit of a gift we have to be thankful for?
Well, I'm sure glad that it came because yeah, friends and family that are farming, I'm happy that they've got an opportunity to sell something for a profit. There wasn't much that was in the black as we looked at spring prices back in March and April. My farm down and my friends down in Mossbank, a lot of lentils, and the canola is lower yielding, really hard to make any money, but we see these higher canola prices. At least there's something that's going to make some money. It's still, I think we're in a tough conditions overall when we haven't seen the run up in durum prices. Lentils are still pretty soft. Most of the crops are soft other than canola. It's the economics are tight. You got to have a really sharp pencil to make it a lot of sense. I'd say, over the last number of years, this is the tightest we've seen the forecast, and we got the blessing of some rain that hopefully produces some bushels. But at the end of the day, the average farm is maybe breaking even across their rotation. Luckily, canola's making it break even instead of being in the red.
Yeah, without canola in the rotation on many farms, it would be a difficult grind.
Yeah, and even this year we're looking at lentils, the early lentils coming off. We've got producers that are coming in with 25, 30 bushels per acre, and then just down the road they're combining 10, 15 bushels per acre because of the disease issues with the root rots and caused by some of that early flooding. And it's really field to field, farm to farm. Those lentil acres are which we're looking at as a kind of a break even crop. If you're unfortunately harvesting one of those poorer fields, poorer crops, that really takes the shine off the budget. It's really going to be one of those years. I think guys don't know what they've got until they've got it in the bin.
David, anything I should have asked, or any other points you'd like to make that we didn't cover?
No, I think that's good, Kevin. Appreciate the opportunity.
No, thank you very much. Let me stop the recording here.